You can say that Dr. Marshall Benton Taylor and Ira Mullins were familiar with each other long before the Pound Gap Massacre, and you can also say that they were on a collision course. A long-time moonshiner and what was referred to as a revenuer that chased him set up what would become known as the Pound Gap Massacre. Dr. Taylor, or otherwise known as Red Fox, was a character in every sense of the word. He was eccentric, boastful, arrogant, and let's be honest, crazy. He was a self-proclaimed herb doctor, called himself a preacher, claimed to be able to perform magic and healing. Many people claim to have been healed by his divine ways when really he was just a manipulator. He was no doctor. The title of doctor is one that he bestowed upon himself. However, he did study under a noted doctor of the day, so to say that he knew absolutely nothing would be false. Somehow he was appointed a revenue agent, busting up the moonshine stills of the area, and in the mountains of Kentucky and Virginia he could perform stakeouts on the tops of high vantage points and use his high-powered telescope to pinpoint his targets. He was efficient at this job, so much so that many of the local moonshiners had planned to extinguish him whenever they had the chance. Enter to our story, Ira Mullins. Ira Mullins, as he was known, was no stranger to revenue officers. He had already been at the other end of a dust-up with one of them and was paralyzed as a result of the shot. That didn't stop his business, though. He kept on going. He used his old wagon and covered the moonshine with straw, often traveling in the back of the wagon with his product and having a driver. Ira Mullins knew that Doc Taylor wanted him, a trophy that would stroke Doc's inflated ego. Ira himself set up a bounty on the old revenuer's head, and Doc knew it and vowed to get Mullins first. One night, Doc Taylor fired a shot into Ira's home, narrowly missing him. Pine Mountain offers beautiful views of both Virginia and Kentucky. Ira would cross Pine Mountain to make his way into Virginia to trade, and of course, he would trade his homebrewed creations. Doc Taylor learned that Ira would be making the trip, so he hired Heenan and Cal Fleming to stake out the area and wait for Ira to pass through. Not only was Ira and his driver making the trip, unfortunately, others as well. The driver was John Chappell, who sat beside of Ira's wife, Lorenza. Ira lay in the back of the wagon as usual. Ira's 14-year-old son, John, and Greenberry Harris walked behind. Wilson Mullins walked in front of the wagon, and his wife, Jane, rode a horse. With Doc and his men stationed, his intended victim came into view, and what resulted would go down as one of the worst massacres in Kentucky and Virginia history, as this occurred right on the border. The three men opened fire on the unsuspecting victims below. The murder took place in what is now known as Killing Rock. In mere seconds, gunfire erupted and rained fire on the victims below. What happened was chilling and a frightening example of what a feud can turn into. Ira was struck 8 times. His wife struck several times. Wilson was struck. Greenberry Harris and John Chappell were also struck. After the gunfire settled, 5 of the 7 in the party were brutally massacred. Ira's 14-year-old son managed to run to safety. Jane Mullins, riding horseback, would plead with them to spare her, and surprisingly they did. It was said that she recognized them through their poor disguises and rode to the Wise County seat in Virginia. As she explained the situation, a posse was immediately organized, and 22 men set out to find them. The Flemings would not be captured until years later. During the shootout, while being captured, Cal was killed. Heenan was brought back to Virginia, but lack of evidence was cited in his release. The main perpetrator was on the run. Doc Taylor would hide out and eventually left the area. He was eventually caught and brought back to Wise, Virginia. After some courthouse wrangling, he was convicted of first-degree murder. Cleverly, in another hearing, he tried to plead insanity, but the judge stopped him and sentenced him to hang. He would sentence him to hang on October 27th, 1893. Unbelievably, he had somehow convinced the sheriff to preach his own funeral, which he did from a courthouse window. He would read, preach, and talk for 2 hours. He had also arranged his body to be unburied for 3 days, in which he claimed he would resurrect. He was hanged, his body unburied for 3 days, and of course, put in the ground when his prophecy would be unfulfilled. We are now here in Murdered Man's Cemetery, and it was named that for all of the murder victims in here, even more than those from the Pound Gap Massacre. You can see the graves of all the victims, in which we've been looking at already, and the site in which this happened, Killing Rock. This story is unbelievable and just crazy, to be honest. All of my videos are about cemeteries, and another one will be coming on the screen soon. Please visit my website. My Patreon links will be in the description. And again, just wanted to say thank you for joining me on this trip. Murdered Man Cemetery, right down the road is Killing Rock. You've seen some of the video here of Killing Rock as well. So once again, from Murdered Man's Cemetery in Jenkins, Kentucky, I will see you again soon.